Okay, so the class is being recorded, and this is 11.A230A, and this is the post-Ramadan and the post-Eid classes. We're starting a new, actually, it's going to be our final or last leg on this lovely journey that we've been together. Today, inshallah, we're continuing with the romantics. We're talking about the poetry aspect of the romantics, and then when we're done with them, we'll move to the novel aspect and the fact that they also wrote novels, like I said. So, how much do we still remember about the romantics? We're talking about their poetry, obviously. We're talking about the late 18th century and early 19th century, and how different or similar is their poetry. Obviously, it was different. It was even revolutionary in terms of the themes that they used to address, and also in terms of the forms that they embraced. Obviously, they were freer when it comes to the use of poetic diction, the vocabulary that they used to employ in their poetry, and also in the forms, the fact that their poetry is for the most part free verse, where you don't have this rigid um, adherence to rhyme and rhythm, and so they were obviously different. Their themes are all about whatever is um, I would say strange, but not in a negative way. Whatever is weird and strange, whatever is wild, because they normally associate wilderness and wildness with purity and innocence and the early stages of man when people were innocent and they don't have this corrupting experience that we're all suffering from and undergoing. So they were obviously different in almost every way. What else about them? They glorify nature, the countryside, obviously. They show respect to people who are close to nature, and then obviously the villagers, the simple people, even people who are not very highly educated. And again, they also give expression to their feelings and also the feelings of others. And this is obviously something new. I mean, to talk about yourself, obviously, this, for the most part, poetry before them was about being impersonal. You don't talk about your feelings and emotions. You only hold a mirror to nature. They don't believe in this idea of mirroring nature as is, obviously. Their poetry was spontaneous. Their poetry was ordinary in terms of idiom, except for the second generation of them who were a bit mythological, like Keats and Shelley and those people. Um, so this is the Romantics. We started off with William Wordsworth, who happens to be a first generation Romantic poet. We have taken the daffodils and we compared it to a diary entry of the diary entry of his sister Dorothy. Obviously, the poem "The Daffodils" was about a shared experience, but when it was presented to us, it wasn't a shared experience. Wordsworth said that he was on his own, he was lonely. We spoke about the difference between the poem and the prose narrative of his sister and why it is um, different. I mean, the poem. We'll go over that again and then move on to another poem by the same poet, namely Pointras Judgment. Another interesting poem, I promise you. But before we proceed, somebody was raising his or her hand. Come to the mic and share with us. Yeah, Hashim.
Yes, I was the one who was raising my hands because I wanted to ask, Doctor, are you sharing a screen with us or no?
I haven't shared any, but at least you can see me, right?
I can see you, but like I thought you
Yeah,
were sharing a screen.
no, not yet, not yet.
Okay, thanks.
Um, you're welcome. So again, and like I said, we're starting off talking about stuff you already know about the Romantics, and then we move on to something not very familiar, which is the second poem, which is, like I said, Point Trash Judgment. Let me just refresh your memory and build on this refreshment and go to the second poem. I'm now sharing. Can you see that? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, good. So again, it's the English Romantic poets, and obviously we're talking about the again late 18th century and early 19th century, and this is a visual guide to the late 18th and early 19th century literary movement that we are referring to as the English Romantics. Again, when we spoke about the Romantics, we were moving away and shifting away from the time periods prior. We have already spoken about the 16th and 17th century, where we did drama. Remember, we did Othello and the Duchess of Malfi. And then we moved on to the 18th century. We didn't have a representative work, but we did speak about the 18th century, and we said that it was the age of reason, where people were prioritizing the reason and intellect over everything else. And even their poetry reflected that the idea of decorum, the idea of appropriateness, the idea of strictly observing rules and rigid forms when it comes to poetry. And this is normally called the Age of Reason or the Age of Enlightenment. And then we moved on, and we're currently doing the Romantics, and obviously we're talking about late 18th century and early 19th century. The Romantic period is normally referred to as a rebellion. So, what is it that they were rebelling against? And this was a rebellion against the frigidity. Frigid means when something is rigid. Rigid means very strict, and the rigidity and strict literary guidelines of the past. So the Romantics whether they were poets or writers, charted new ways for self-expression, shifting the focus entirely to poetry. I remember when I introduced this new genre, which is poetry, we started to make those distinctions between a poem and non-poem. Remember, we spoke about poems being positioned in the middle of the page. They don't follow this margin to margin setup. We spoke also about the idea that whatever you can say in a couple of lines in a poem, you can say in volumes and in pages upon pages in novels and essays and everything in between. Again, poetry is also about condensation. Again, it's the idea that in a novel you have hundreds of pages, and in a poem you can have like seven or eight or perhaps 10 lines, and both of them can address the same thing. But poetry is about condensation. So poetry's true genius lies in its intensity. Whatever a novelist expresses over 300 pages or perhaps more, a poet can express in a single condensed stanza. Again, it comes with its expectations and requirements. If it's a couple of lines or a condensed idea that is otherwise expressed in 300 pages in a novel, you need to be highly alert to what is being said. Poetry, like I always say, is highly intellectual and very philosophical. It's not for the faint-hearted. Again, it's also about uniting opposites and manipulating the language. Again, these are also features that you we normally associate with poetry. The idea of musicality, that poetry is musical. When we talk about music, we talk about the rhyme when lines or the ending of lines rhyme together, they sound together, the last sound, and in lines, whether they come following each other or alternating. We'll talk also about rhythm and meter, which is obviously the horizontal arrangement of stressed and unstressed syllables. Again, what is also unique about poetry is that it is figurative and metaphorical, where we have imagery addressing our different senses, the sense of touch, the sense of hearing, the sense of seeing. And again, we're using metaphors and similes and personifications. Um, Again, poetry, if you're looking at a poem and you're trying to dissect it and kind of tear it down to its basic components, you would have to consider the sound aspect, where we talk about rhythm, we talk about meter, alliteration, assonance, and onomatopoeia. We should look at the diction, and diction is obviously another fancy name or label for vocabulary or words, right? Using specific vocabulary. Obviously, this is not what the romantics are doing because they're using the language of everyday. Again, imagery is very important and also figurative language. I remember telling you that you need to kind of uh, be on the lookout about the meaning of the word romantic itself, because some people are under the impression that whenever we mention romantic, it means that we're talking about people falling in love with each other and perhaps getting married and living happily ever after. This is actually what we don't mean by the romantic in the romantic 19th century sense. So, Romanticism in the 19th century and in Romantic poetry is about wilderness, about untapped potential, untainted nature, and free spirits. It's about rebellion and revolutions. It's about challenging the status quo. It is also a total rejection of established norms and poetic rigidity. Again, this is a small comparison between what used to happen before the Romantics and what is happening with them. The time that we have before the Romantics was the 18th century, and it is normally referred to as Enlightenment. And Enlightenment is about using your mind, is about reason and order, calm, harmony, and rationality. The Romantics came with their paradigm shift. They have changed the literary scene beyond recognition. With the Romantics, we're talking about emotion, subjectivity, whatever is irrational, whatever is imaginative, and whatever is spontaneous. So what is the toolkit? If you're looking, or if you're perhaps dissecting a Wordsworthian poem, a romantic poem, you need to look out for simple diction, simple vocabulary, the idea of nature and the glorification and the celebration of nature. And obviously, we're talking about the countryside. They find solace in the landscape. Again, emotions and the emotion and imaginations are very important for them. And obviously, the idea of breaking away from the city with its hustle and bustle. So these are things that give the Romantics their trademark. So again, this is a checklist whenever we're dealing with a romantic poem. So glorification of nature, freedom from rigidity, focus on the imagination and emotions, using simple diction or vocabulary, and also the addressing whatever is exotic and mythological. And this is obviously the second generation romantic poets. They are very famous with this idea of whatever is exotic and mythological. Again, when we talk about the Romantics, and this is we talk about their vision of the world and reality, they edify, um, or they think highly of whatever is wild. That's why they glorify nature and they think of nature as edifying. And a teacher, nature for them acts as a pure teacher, and the city is viewed as corrupting, full of noise and calculation. Again, there is this turn inward. I mean, they move to whatever is inside. So, the inner self, a radical focus on subjective human moods, passions, and internal psychological struggles. Again, the poet thinks of himself as a prophet. He has a creative spirit. He has a genius with a vision, and obviously, with those qualities, he can transcend traditional formal rules to speak spiritual truth. Again, the idea of the exotic and weird is something that we're going to find in their poetry and also in their other forms of expression like novels. And this is what we're going to see with Frankenstein, obviously. They have this fascination with the remote, the mysterious, the medieval, and even the monstrous or occult. So, according to them, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. So when we talk about the romantics, we talk about three stages of development. We start off with the pre-romantics, and a key figure here would be William Blake, and then we move to the first generation of the romantics, and obviously here we're talking about Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and then we move to the second generation romantic poets with people like Shelley, Byron, and Keats. So again, the pre-romantics, the first generation, and the second generation. And then we move on and perhaps shed more light on William Wordsworth, the champion or the romantic champion. He is normally known as the poet of nature. He is a pioneer of the first generation of romantics. He rejected the hustle and bustle of city life for the deep countryside. He believed in rural farmers, or he believes that they were the purest of humans due to their daily proximity to uncorrupted land. He sought fresh air, pure water, and simplicity to fuel his creative spirit. Quite willingly and lovingly, he spent perhaps the last part of his life in the countryside. He decided to go there and lived there. Um, Again, this is Wordsworth, like you see, a pioneer and a central father or figure of the English Romantic movement. He left the busy, corrupt city behind to reside in the purity and solitude of the untamed countryside. He used to believe that a poet is a supremely free individual, a visionary guided by imagination rather than formal rules. And this is where, yeah, this is obviously some of his, comparisons that he used to make. He and other Romantic poets, he used to live in and around Grasmere, which is obviously a place over there in the countryside. He used to live in a cottage called Love Cottage, and this was his retreat to nature to escape the calculations, crookedness, and artificiality of city life. Again, for him, the nature is more of a jungle than a garden. He and the other romantics fiercely rejected the garden, the trimmed, man-made, artificial garden, and they thought highly of the jungle because of how wild and pure and unmolested by human hands it was. According to them, farmers are better than elites. They value simple, naive, innocent nature dwellers over the sophisticated, corrupt society of the city. And the case study that we have is I wandered lonely as a cloud. We have done the poem and we'll talk about it again. Um, Remember, we started off by deconstructing the whole experience, and we started with the title itself. It's you have the I, you have the idea of wandering, and then the idea of loneliness or being on their own. So I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. This is the start, and again, it can tell you a great deal about those people, the romantics. Again, wandering where? Wandering in nature, alone or with other people, obviously alone. Um, so wandering has to do with the idea of, open space and freedom. You cannot obviously wander in a crowded and busy city where there is heavy traffic. Obviously, wandering would require the unfettered and vast landscape, which is obviously normally associated with the countryside. When we talk about the loneliness or the lonely aspect of the title, I wandered lonely as a cloud. Obviously, we're talking about the idea of solitude, and we're talking about solitude not being lonely in the modern sense of the word, where you feel sad and overwhelmed. No, we're not talking about that. Solitude, we're talking more of this idea of solitude. It is a chosen positive state of mind. So to be lonely is to be unfettered by the engagements, problems, and corruptions of the masses, leaving the mind free to contemplate the universe. Again, I wandered lonely as a cloud, and obviously the word cloud can tell you a great deal about the kind of elevation that they are envisioning of themselves and the world. And being a cloud, it means that you're above everyone and everything else. And being a cloud also links you to nature. So, as you know, and this is very symbolic, a cloud exists high above the earth, silently observing the landscape below. So it moves completely freely, entirely untouched and molested by human society, representing the ultimate freedom that nature affords the solitary individual. Again, when we spoke about that, we spoke about the romantic aspects and elements in the poem, the idea of solitude, the idea of being one with the different elements of nature, floating with them over the valleys and the hills, seeing a crowd of golden daffodils moving beside the lake, beneath the trees fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So, what is Wordsworthian about the poem and other poems? The idea of creation. How does creation come about in their poetry? The first thing is for them to go having this solitary mode. So it's the solitary experience, venturing into outside nature entirely alone to absorb pure sights and fresh air, and then they go home for this tranquil retreat, returning home to the quiet isolation of the couch. And then when they go there and they lie down, they allow the memory of the landscape to work within their consciousness, filling their heart with pleasure. And when it sinks in, and when the heart is filled with joy and pleasure, uh, um, a spontaneous overflow happens, translating the internalized nature into lyrical poetry. So this is the whole creative romantic process. Remember what we ended with? We started to make this comparison between the poetic eye in I Wandered Lonely as a crowd and as a cloud, and the historical we in Dorothy's journal entry. Um, we spoke about the difference between them. We said that if we check the journal, we'll find that it was a shared experience. It was Wordsworth and Dorothy and perhaps other people. It was factual. It has everyday details that are unranked. The reality is that we have a shared collaborative experience. If you move to the poem, it's totally different. You're going to see that Wordsworth is saying that I was lonely, which means I was alone. Obviously, we need to make this distinction between honesty in a literal sense and poetic honesty and poetic truthfulness. What we're after here is poetic truth, not truth in the literal every day sense of the word. Okay, this is it. I think I also have a video that I would like to share with you about the same. Let me see if I can have it. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay, wait.
Today,
Can you?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah. Let's listen to that and see what it is all about.
today we're jumping into a literary revolution that was all about championing powerful feelings, wild nature, and the individual spirit. It's the story of how raw emotion completely overthrew the cold, hard logic of the era that came before it. This is the Romantic Rebellion. All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First up, we'll ask what even makes a poem look like a poem. Then we'll get into the rebellion itself, what it was all about. After that, we'll check out a super famous example to see it in action, and we'll wrap up with a little secret that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. All right, first things first, let's start with this super simple question to get us warmed up. Just take a look at this. Seriously, don't even read the words. How do you know it's a poem? There's something about the shape of it on the page, right? It just screams poetry. It's one of those things we all kind of know instinctively, even if we can't explain exactly why. And this right here makes it totally obvious. See how prose just fills up the page? It runs right from one edge to the other, like a solid block. But poetry, it has its own look, its own visual architecture. It's got those shorter lines, that unique shape. So when you boil it all down, poetry uses its form, the way it looks and the way it sounds, to signal to you, hey, I'm not just regular writing. It's like language getting all dressed up for a special occasion. Okay, so with that idea of form in mind, let's see how this all exploded into a massive literary movement. We're talking about the Romantic Rebellion, which kicked off in the late 1700s. And man, it was all about rejecting everything the previous era stood for. And this lays out the conflict perfectly. It's like a tale of two worlds. You've got the age of reason, super focused on order, logic, and what's good for society. And then, bam, in come the romantics, and they're all about raw emotion, the power of the individual, and the wild, messy beauty of nature. Now, I gotta make this super clear. When we say romantic, we are not talking about romance novels or Valentine's Day. Not at all. Think rebellion. This was a movement that celebrated rebels, free spirits, and people who challenged the rules. They believed you'd find more truth in a wild, overgrown forest than in some perfect, tidy garden. And this quote right here, this was basically their slogan, their rallying cry. It comes from their manifesto, a book called Lyrical Ballads from the 1790s. And the message was simple. Forget the old, stuffy rules. Real poetry comes from genuine, powerful feelings just bubbling up and spilling out. Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this look like in practice? Well, let's dive into probably one of the most famous poems from one of the guys who started it all, William Wordsworth. Right from the jump, the poem puts us right inside the speaker's head. It's just one person, all alone, just kind of floating through this big open landscape, just like a cloud. And boom, right there in the first few lines, you've got the whole romantic checklist. Check 1, focus on the individual I. Check 2, big time love for nature. And check 3, using simple, everyday language that anyone could understand. No fancy, complicated words needed. But here's the thing, the poem doesn't actually end out there in the field. The final lines jump forward in time. He's back home, on his couch, just thinking about that day. So the real magic isn't just seeing the daffodils, it's the memory living on inside him. And this basically gives us the recipe for a romantic poem. Step 1, go out and have a powerful experience in nature. Step 2, go home, find a quiet moment, and think back on it. Step 3, let that remembered emotion spill out onto the page. See, it's not about reporting facts, it's about capturing a feeling. But here's where the story gets really interesting. There's a little secret, a twist, behind this famous poem about being all alone. I mean, that first line is legendary, right? I wandered lonely as a cloud. It creates this perfect image of the solitary artist, just him and nature, having this profound moment. So, was he really alone? Let's investigate. Because as it turns out, we have another eyewitness account from that exact same day. And this is the bombshell. On the left, we have William's famous poem. On the right, an entry from his sister Dorothy's private journal. On the exact day he wrote about wandering lonely, she wrote in her diary, "We saw a few daffodils." He wasn't alone. His sister was with him the whole time. Okay, so hold on. Does this mean he was lying? Not exactly. He actually used her journal entries to help him remember the details for the poem later on. The key thing to get here is that for a romantic, the emotional truth was way more important than the factual truth. He used the word lonely not because he was physically by himself, but because it captured the feeling of that moment, that deep personal connection to the scene. That was the real story he wanted to tell. And that idea right there is the absolute core of the romantic legacy. Poetry's job wasn't to be a camera just capturing what happened. Its job was to translate what an experience felt like. Which brings us to a really great question to chew on. What the Romantics were all about was showing us that sometimes the truest stories aren't about the literal facts, but about the feelings we carry away with us. So I'll leave you with this. Does a piece of art have to be factually true to feel emotionally honest? It's a question they were wrestling with back then, and it's one we can definitely still ask ourselves today.
Clear? I think we now know a lot about the Romantics, their characteristics and features, and we have seen that implemented also in one of their poems. Now we're going to shift gears and move to another interesting poem, and we're going to apply all what we know about the Romantics to the poem. The poem is a little bit long, and I'll show you the poem, and we're going to take it one stanza at a time. Before we do that, I think you can see the poem, right? Can you see the poem?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
we can.
nice, good. So the title of the poem is Point Trash Judgment. And I would like us to, like we always do, to reflect on the title before we go to the rest of the poem, because, like we always say, titles have a bearing on what happens in the content uh, that they represent. And obviously, point rash judgment is no exception. So, point rash judgment, and let's start with something that we know. So let's start with the word. You choose a word that we start with. Point, rash, or judgment. What do you think? You know what judgment means? What rash means? What do you think if I say judgment? What's a judgment?
You're judging someone on something he did.
Yeah, yeah, judge. I mean, yeah, it can be as generic as judging somebody. I mean, making an assessment of something that somebody did, right? So this is judgment is more or less like an assessment, an evaluation and assessment of situations, and based on your assessment of the situations, you can come up with a judgment on the person himself. So what about this idea that, I mean, you normally hear it thrown around all the time? Don't judge. Does it mean that judging is a bad thing?
Superficial on the outside, on the looks, on the cover.
Yeah, judging is about, uh, believing that you're better than other people and that you are in a position that would allow you to judge them when everybody is like everybody else, right? So if you believe that we're all equal, so that wouldn't give you the freedom and the right to judge other people to say that they are good or bad, right? Because we are all human beings and we have equal rights to everything. So that is perhaps the reason why we say that judging people is not a good thing, right? So judging people in and of itself is a bad thing. How about if I say rash judgment? You know what rash is?
Like not
Quick,
thinking about it.
Excuse me?
Not thinking
He's
about it.
rushing
Yeah,
judgment.
when you do something rashly or
fast.
yeah, it's fast. Okay, so if judgment and judging people is in and of itself bad, so obviously judging somebody rashly in a rashful way, if this is the right adjective or adverb, do you think it's even worse, right? To have a snap and a rash judgment on somebody, wallahi, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So rash judgment, and then you have the word point, and obviously we will not be able to understand. I don't want us to waste time trying to think and figure out what point means because it needs a context. But at least you know what rash judgment is, right? Point rash judgment. So if we're talking about rash judgment, what do you think the poem, if this is the title of a poem, what do you think the poem will be about?
A
Make a
lesson.
guess. Yeah. You can now you're in a position to make educated guesses. Now that we have unpacked the title. Yeah, go ahead.
Poor judgment.
Poor judgment. This is what you're saying. You're saying that the poem is going to be about poor judgment.
Like judging without thinking about it first, or doing it in like without context.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. It can be about that. It can be about judging people without perhaps giving them the benefit of the doubt, perhaps not doing enough due process, asking the right questions, checking and investigating, right? Yeah, that can be about that. Yeah. Thank you, Hala.
And
What
doctor,
else?
sorry, I
Yeah.
think also I want to add something that anger and emotion can play actually do the same. When you see someone made a mistake, you give him rush judgment by his feelings, by anger.
Yeah, that can be an aspect. The idea that part of rash judgments is about being emotional, being reactive to something. Yeah, it can be about that. So you guys are trying to say that the poem can be about that. It can be about snap judgments. It can be about people judging other people without thinking twice about it, without giving those people the opportunity to perhaps explain why they did what they did, right? Nice. Let's go to the poem itself. Okay, and let's take the first stanza. Yeah, let's read the first stanza. I'll give you a couple of minutes to read it and tell me what you have understood. And go ahead. I'm not expecting you to understand everything because this is poetry, and we said poetry is the most intellectual and the most philosophical. Okay, so I'm not expecting much. Okay. So whatever you're making of this, is somebody narrating something? telling us a story? Is somebody describing something? What is it that you're getting from this first stanza? What's happening, if any?
Teacher,
Hmm.
uh, like um, uh, like like a narrow uh, of two stones and grass and then and lucky and lucky bus and from and by center and
Okay. Hmm. So these are
and
keywords. This is what you're trying to say, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Between water and slope cover and stress and people, speaker and two friends working there.
Okay. Great. Okay. So some keywords, yeah, they are very central to a good understanding of what is happening in stanza one. So what's happening in stanza one? What is it that you can lay your hand firmly on? Do we have a time? Do we have a place? Do we have a movement? Where are we? Do you think we are in the city? Mm.
In the
I
countryside.
think social position, the different social position, I think.
I haven't felt any social positions yet, yeah, Hashim. But somebody was saying something that she felt that we are in the countryside, where we have words like the sun, we have words like the water, slopes, natural causeways, rough stones. Grasmere is obviously a place, right? Okay. So
Yes.
this is, I mean, if we talk about the place, this is obviously the countryside. Do we have reference to time?
Yes, one calm
Mm,
September morning.
yeah, okay, good. So obviously, um, we're not sure who is speaking, but perhaps for the time being, we're going to say that this is the poet describing a scene in nature on an early September morning, right? Yeah, good. Let's move to the second stanza and see what's happening.
Doctor, if I may,
Yeah, okay.
the lyrics here, words are more formal than the previous one by the same poet.
Yeah, they are. Not formal. Perhaps I would say that they are more um, poetic. I mean, we're not used to Wordsworth using these um, sophisticated structures. Where with I wandered lowly as a cloud, you have very simple vocab. You have also very simple lines, right? But let's keep reading and see whether he's consistent about this level of difficulty, or perhaps we're going to understand more, right? Let's see. Let's read the second stanza. Yalla, go ahead. Are we getting anywhere? Is it getting clearer? Do we know where we are? Are we still, do we still believe that this is nature? This is the countryside, not the city? Is
Yes.
it, is it still the poet, or perhaps we have other people?
Still
What do
the
you think?
poet till now.
It's
I
a
mean,
moving soul.
how about we? Because you're saying still the poet. Perhaps you mean the poet and other people, because he said we, right?
Yes, the poet and his two beloved friends that he was
Ye-
talking about.
Yeah, I haven't seen any beloved friends. Where are you getting these beloved friends from? Yeah, what's your name?
The first stanza, Hala.
Hala? I don't see. But we're reading the second one. Do we have beloved friends here? Do we have a reference to two? Where did you get that
We
from? Yeah, we does not make them three,
was
right?
the stanza that we just read before this. Is it not the same poem?
Yeah. Do we have a reference to them?
Yeah. Yeah,
Where?
myself and two beloved friends.
Oh, where? Let me see. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you're correct. So it has always been there, the idea that he wasn't alone, right? But you
Yes.
guys, when I said it was the poet and nobody else, you said yes. Okay, so it was there. So obviously, this is collaboration. It's not only the poet like we have seen in I Wander Lonely as a Cloud, right? Nice, very good. Okay, so it's the poet and his two beloved friends, and they are obviously strolling along in nature. Whatever they are doing over there, and what kind of mood do they have? Happy, sad? What do
They
you
were
think?
observing the nature.
Yes. Now, why would you go to observe nature in the countryside unless you are wet? If you are one of the people of the countryside, you would. Do you have the time to observe nature? Because people in the countryside are, for the most part, peasants, farmers. They are busy doing this and that, right?
Maybe they're foreigners to the
Yeah,
place.
perhaps excellent, but perhaps they are foreigners, they are visitors, they are tourists, right? We don't know yet, right? But I mean, we have words that can tell us what kind of attitude they are adopting, which can tell us that they don't belong. I mean, the idea that they have this sportive wanderings, we said that this is out of keeping with people in the countryside who are very practical, who have other things to chew on, like working, harvesting, right? So most likely those people are from outside, right? Let's move to the third stanza and see what it is all about. Yeah, let's do this. Okay. So what's happening here?
They're plucking flowers.
Hmm. Again, they are not harvesting anything because we may think that they are workers or farmers, right? Harvesting something. They're not doing that. That would perhaps reinforce our impression that they are visitors, outsiders, right? What about these very big words and references that they are making? The Queen Osmunda, Naiad, Grecian Brook, Lady of the Mare or Mere. These are big
metaphor.
things. Yeah, these are obviously. Is it the language of Wordsworth, or this is perhaps the language of the three people involved?
The language of word for.
Yeah, I know that he is the creator, but obviously, this is the language that these three people are using. Those connections that they are making, obviously, theirs. Again, what does this tell us about them? Are they illiterate? Are they educated? We established the fact that they are from outside, tourists. But what kind of tourists are they? Do you think they are sophisticated, educated, or what?
Maybe they are because usually people in the countryside are not educated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not anymore, I promise you. Let's move on. This is a little long, but perhaps um, yeah, look at this. Yeah, right. Okay. So what's happening now? Are they still alone in nature, the three of them?
No,
Are they joined by other people? Or are they joining other people?
they met a man.
Okay, they met a man, and even
And now
before
I
meeting,
think they're in the city because they're
Mm,
talking about busy roads and people and women and men.
if you understand what the word reapers mean, you would reconsider what you said just now. You know what
They
reapers
are
are?
judging. They are
Re
judging the man. They
The
well,
saw.
let,
workers who
let,
are
let's
harvesting the crops.
yeah, I mean we're talking about the countryside where people are harvesting. You know what harvest is? محصول,
Yes, yes.
محصول, حصاد. So they are still in the countryside. So while moving, obviously it's a very big area that they were in, and now they are passing by men and women who are in a harvesting mood. They are reaping when you grow crops and it's time that you collect them.
Ah, yes.
Okay? So they passed by those people. Obviously, they heard noise, typical. They heard laughter, and obviously because this is harvesting is a happy time, right? And then they kept moving, obviously, until they spotted something or someone, right? What did they spot? Or who did they spot?
A peasant.
A what?
A peasant girl.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they spotted a man, right? Okay. So what kind of man is
Spotted a
he?
tall
Well,
man.
a tall man, attired means clothed and or dressed in peasant's garb. Okay. What's the difference between the man and everybody else over there?
He was standing alone
He was standing alone, right?
and dressed like a simple farmer, I guess.
Okay. Was he farming and harvesting like everybody else?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, read on.
Alone by the lake.
Yeah, what we now, because perhaps it will be even clearer in the upcoming stage. The fact that, I mean, everybody was on perhaps one side, busy doing this and that, doing this and that, and he was standing alone, right? So this is taken as what?
He's
The
not working.
not working,
Betty.
right?
Yes.
And he's not
There's
working. Uh,
judgment.
wh-
Yes,
when
judgment for
everybody
him.
else when everybody else is working and busy harvesting, okay.
He
So
judgment idler.
yeah, I mean this is what how they described him, idler, which is a variation of the word idle. What is an idle? If you
It's
said that this guy
lazy.
is lazy, don't this
Yes.
is a judgment, right?
Yeah, Rashi judgment.
Yes.
I mean, standing on his own, and while everybody else is, according to them, busy harvesting, does not mean that he is lazy or something, right? Obviously, they fell into the trap of judging. I mean, they have judged him from afar, right? And obviously, from
Yes. Rush
afar,
judgment.
yes, from afar, he for them he felt like
He felt
a
like he's
norm
wasting his
yeah
time.
no, he felt like a normal individual. He has all what it takes to be able to work, right, to go and work and make a hustle, right? So this is from afar. Okay, keep reading. So what's the rude awakening here? What did they realize?
The man is sickness.
Yeah, the fact that they obviously,
They
uh,
judged rashly.
yes, that they were mistaken in their assessment and judgment. So upon, closer inspection, when they came very close to him, they realized that he is perhaps old, sick, right? And he is decimated in every way. I mean, the fact that he is weak, he has weak limbs, somebody who is unable to work. So, what's this idea of catching a fish? If you cannot work, you cannot catch fish. What's the difference between working in the fields and farming and harvesting and catching the fish? Which is easier to do?
Walking.
Working in the field is easier than
Fishing.
No,
I thought catching a
no,
fish,
no.
the only thing that you would need is to show some patience, right?
Patient.
Yeah.
Yes,
This
yes.
is,
That's what I'm trying to say. It's
but
patient.
yeah, but obviously harvesting and working the fields and the land would require physical strength, right? A lot of it.
Yeah.
And
No,
this
I
is
know,
what they,
but you guarantee
yeah,
you'll take your. No, no, sorry. Because working in the field, because it actually is going to happen. You're going to work. It's in your hand. While fishing, you have to wait. Maybe 10 minutes, 30 minutes. Maybe not fish
okay.
around.
So yeah, perhaps this is what I'm trying to say, that this is perhaps the only option that he has, is to wait very patiently for something to come out. Again, because he cannot work in the field because of how weak he is, physically weak. And this is the realization that the three people came to. They came to the realization that they were mistaken, right?
Right, right.
Okay, what did they do to atone for this kind of guilt? They feel guilty now. They feel that they have mistaken this guy, and they want to feel less guilty about it. What is it that they are
Temper
going
all
to
our
do?
thoughts with charity.
Okay, the first thing that they can and that they actually did was to engage in self-reproach. Self-reproach when you blame yourself for something, when you rebuke and criticize yourself, right? Acknowledging that you have made a mistake, right?
Yes.
Okay, and the next, I think we still have something about what else they did. Let's see. Yeah, let's read this.
Doctor,
Yes,
yes, I apologize for the rush answer. I rushed the answer, but I did not think about the. I
that's
did not
fine.
read little bit.
That's fine. No problem.
I don't think this makes sense. What is the what does the naming of the place have to do with them feeling guilty?
Well, they want to make a point. They want to kind of mark the occasion. They want to write something, perhaps for themselves when they come back sometime, I don't know when, or perhaps to other people. They want people to see this kind of label, point rash judgment, and people start to ask why. Why are we having this place called this? And people are going to retell the story that there were three people and they judged a guy, and that can be a lesson that they can be reminded of all the time, and perhaps other generations. This is the idea. Yeah, and that can be silly. It can also be a little bit controversial. Are you, I mean, it's about entitlements. Can you really, if you're a foreigner, if you're an outsider, can you really engage in renaming places
No,
regard?
you're not even a citizen in the place.
I'm saying it can be about, yeah, I mean, it can be like a silly or a sad or even a serious and dangerous precedent. Every time you go to a place, you feel entitled to, I mean, removing the original label or name of the place and give it a name of its own. It's just patronizing, but they could have done other stuff to atone for their guilt if they
Yes.
feel guilty, right? But this is how the poet thinks about it. Again, it's a stark reminder that people were here and they have committed this kind of sin. The sin and the guilt here is the fact that they misjudged a person, they very rashly judged him, saying that he is idle and everything, and hence the title of the poem, Point Rash Judgment. And point here would mean the place or the area, and now rash judgment. Okay, let's listen to a video on that. I'm sure you're going to like it, and it's going to sum up the whole idea. And then we talk about it when we have finished. Um, Let me see if. No.
All right, today we're going to unpack a really powerful story from the poet William.
Can you hear that? Hello?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, today we're going to unpack a really powerful story from the poet William Wordsworth. It's all about a snap judgment, one of those simple mistakes that ends up having this huge impact. It's a fantastic tale about just how fast we can judge people and, well, how incredibly wrong we can be.
So let me ask you this. Seriously, think about it for a second. We've all been there, right? You see someone and boom, your brain just instantly writes a whole story about them. Well, this whole explainer is about one of those moments. But this wasn't just any old misjudgment. This one was so powerful, it literally put a new place on the map. Okay, so picture this. Our story kicks off on a super calm September morning. The narrator, who is actually Wordsworth himself, is out taking a walk with a couple of good friends. They're by the shore of Grasmere, this gorgeous lake out in the English countryside. And the whole scene, it's just perfectly peaceful. So they're strolling along this secluded little path, kind of tucked right there between the water and the woods. It's a quiet, private spot. Definitely not a path for anyone who's in a rush. You really get the sense that they have all the time in the world. And they are just completely carefree. Wordsworth calls it a vacant mood, which basically means their minds are just open, not focused on anything in particular. They're just noticing the little things. A feather on the shore, some thistle floating on the lake, which is like glass. It's this perfect picture of, happy idleness. So here are the friends, totally lost in this peaceful morning vibe. But then, something changes. The mood starts to shift. A new sound cuts through the quiet, coming from some fields nearby. It's the harvest. You can hear people working hard, laughing, talking, bringing in the crops. And this creates such a stark contrast, right? On one side, you've got our friends on their lazy little stroll. On the other, you have the whole community engaged in this super productive work. And it's right then, at that exact moment, they see him. Yeah, through the morning haze, they see this figure, a man dressed in peasant's clothes, standing completely alone, fishing by the lake. He's just so still, so solitary. Again, a huge contrast to all that busy, cheerful energy of the reapers not too far away. So when they see this guy, alone, fishing, while seemingly everyone else is working the harvest, the friends, well, they don't hesitate, not for a second. They instantly come to this shared, super confident conclusion about what kind of person he is. Yep, they all say it, pretty much in unison. This guy, he must be an idler, a lazy person. I mean, he's just wasting a perfectly good day fishing when he could be out in the fields earning good money. Money that he's definitely going to need for the winter. The judgment is just so fast and everyone agrees. And honestly, it's pretty harsh. Now, let's be honest for a second. Put yourself in their shoes. It's a beautiful day. You can hear all this hard work happening all around you. And then you see one person who looks like they're just not contributing. It's a really easy conclusion to jump to, isn't it? So they're walking, kind of muttering to each other about this lazy guy. They get closer and closer to where he's standing. And just as they get there, the man turns to greet them. And in that one single moment, everything they thought they knew, that whole story they made up about him, it just completely falls apart. The reality hits them like a ton of bricks. It is immediate and it is shocking. This is not an idler. No way. This is a man who is clearly deeply sick. All that confidence, that smug judgment, it just shatters into a million pieces against the hard truth of what's right in front of them. And Wordsworth really slows the poem down here. He forces us to look, to really see this man with him. He's gaunt, with sunken cheeks. His limbs are wasted away. The description is just so painful. This isn't a guy choosing to take a day off. This is a man who is struggling just to stand upright. And this is the heartbreaking truth of the whole thing. He wasn't fishing for fun. He was just way, way too weak for the hard labor of the harvest. So instead, he was using the one skill he could still manage in his condition, just trying to catch a few fish to earn what the poem calls a pittance. I mean, a tiny, tiny amount of money, just enough to survive. Wow. I mean, can you just imagine the silence between the friends in that moment? This one encounter completely changes their whole day. It leaves a permanent mark. That easy, beautiful morning walk is suddenly transformed into this heavy, really profound lesson. Suddenly, their own happy idleness doesn't feel so happy anymore. The joy is just gone. And it's replaced by this deep sense of shame and regret. They're forced to look at themselves, to confront how quick they were to judge, and to feel pretty terrible about how uncharitable they were. So let's just break this down, because the gap between what they thought and what was real is just huge. They saw an idler, but the reality was a man worn down by sickness. They thought he was losing a day of work, but the truth was he was too weak to labor. They assumed he was choosing not to work when he was actually using his best skill to gain a pittance. I mean, it's just a complete reversal. And to make sure they would never, ever forget this lesson, the friends actually gave that spot a name. They called it Point Rash Judgment. Think about that. They turned a physical place, a point on the shore of a lake, into a permanent moral reminder for themselves. Be careful what you assume, think before you speak, and maybe, just maybe, lead with a little charity. You know, this poem was written over 200 years ago, but the lesson? Man, it feels more relevant today than ever, doesn't it? Every single day, whether we're online or just out in the world, we make these snap judgments based on a single photo, a headline, a 10-second clip. So the question I want to leave you with is this: where are the points of rash judgment in our world today? And what can we do to remember to just pause and think before we make one of our own?
Hmm. Yeah. So is it getting clearer now?
Yes, he has a good point.
Yes, that's clear.
Okay. I think I have another version. Would you like to listen to the other version? It's a variation on this one. Perhaps it
Yes.
can give you more insights into it. Let's do it.
Let's be honest, how often do you size someone up in like a split second? You make a snap judgment based on almost nothing. It happens, right? We all do it. But what if a poet from 200 years ago, William Wordsworth, actually gave us a powerful way to deal with this very modern problem? Well, that's what we're going to dig into, how his incredible insights can help us see past our own biases. Seriously, think about it. When was the last time? Was it the person in front of you at the coffee shop? Someone you saw on social media? Maybe even a colleague in a meeting? We form these instant opinions, and a lot of the time we don't have all the facts. And this impulse, well, it's rooted in something we call bias. And this is exactly what bias is. It's when we form these really strong and often negative opinions that aren't based on facts at all. They're just based on impressions, on hearsay. It's kind of like writing a whole story about someone when you haven't even bothered to read the first page of their book. And look, this is a deeply human thing, but the poet William Wordsworth, he explored this with such amazing insight. He believed the key to getting past our biases wasn't something you'd find in a busy city or in the rules of society. No, for him, the answer was somewhere much, much more fundamental. For Wordsworth, that place was nature. Yep, nature. For Wordsworth, nature wasn't just a bunch of pretty mountains and lakes to look at. He saw it as the ultimate classroom. It was the place where we could learn our most important moral lessons. So let's get into his thinking here. For him, nature was pure and innocent. It was the origin of life, before cities came along and complicated everything. He saw it as a place of perfect harmony, perfect symmetry, and because of all that, he believed it was our greatest teacher. Wordsworth was convinced that if we just got ourselves out into the countryside, we could reconnect with a more truthful, a purer way of seeing the world, and more importantly, seeing each other. And this whole idea is just perfectly captured in one of his most powerful poems. And that brings us to his poem, Point Rash Judgment. It's basically a short story told in verse, and it is the perfect case study on just how dangerous our first impressions can be. So picture this. The story kicks off on a gorgeous September morning. The narrator and his friends are just taking a nice, leisurely stroll by a lake. It's harvest time, so the air is buzzing with activity. And from way off in the distance, they spot two things. First, there's a group of farmers, and they are busting their tails, working hard in the fields. And then there's this other guy, all by himself, just fishing by the lake, seemingly doing nothing. And right away, they judge him. From way back where they are, they all agree, yep, he must indeed be an idle man, a lazy guy just slacking off during the busiest time of the year. But then they get closer, and the reality is just shocking. The man isn't idle. He's worn down by sickness, gaunt and lean. His legs are so frail they can barely even hold him up. And that's when it hits them. He wasn't avoiding work. He was physically too sick, too weak to be out there in the fields. And his fishing? It wasn't for fun. It was a desperate attempt to catch even a tiny meal from what the poem calls a dead, unfeeling lake, a lake that wasn't giving up any fish. You can just imagine the impact this had on the group. Their whole carefree, happy mood just evaporates. As Wordsworth puts it, it was changed to serious musing and to self-reproach. They were just ashamed. Ashamed of their quick, cruel, and totally wrong assumption. And to make absolutely sure they would never ever forget this lesson, they did something pretty remarkable. They renamed that spot on the shore. From that day on, they called it Point Rash Judgment. Now, this story shows how we misjudge strangers, but Wordsworth also explored a kind of misunderstanding that can be even more painful. And this brings us to a different kind of misjudgment. This isn't a snap judgment about a stranger.
Yeah, this is the end because it's now moving to another poem that we haven't taken. So is it clear now?
Yeah, it's a very
Yes.
beautiful lecture. Very good, beautiful.
Nice, good.
It's teaching us, and yeah, it's actually it's nowadays the rush judgment everywhere, even
Yeah,
in online or AI. You
yeah,
cannot know the difference.
yeah, that's true. I mean, the idea that we're very hasty with our ready-made judgments, taking labels to each other. Yeah. Okay, we're going to stop on this nice note, and I'll see you inshallah next week. I would like for you to attend with us if you can, of course, on Sunday. We normally meet at 10 a.m. If you can make it, that would be lovely. Sunday. Um, I think you guys have the link by now. If not, I can send the link a day before the meeting next week. So we're meeting next week on Sunday and also, inshallah, Sunday and Wednesday. Thank you so much, and I'll see you, inshallah.
Dr. Sameh,
Yeah. Can I stop the recording because obviously we don't need
yes.
it anymore? And then we talk about the grades because obviously it's about the grades.